Hi everyone, I thought I'd just do a quick little video on some things that we can think about while we're physically distancing but still socially connected, and particularly that a lot of our connections that we'll need to be strengthening at this time are within our family. So kind of some tips around really important aspects of that, and maybe switching some of our mentality around teaching our kids academics while they're off school to teaching them relationship skills and emotional regulation skills and self-calming skills that will help get us out of fight and flight and into the ability to actually learn. So I thought we'd kind of run through some of those. So stay tuned. So let's get started. So I'd like to start with what we can think about as the basis, the solid grounding for all relationships, whether it's adult to adult or in our parenting relationship. And that is the three elements that are within a relationship. Those three elements are me, you, and we. So when we're thinking about adult relationships, I have to have an understanding of me. I have to be intrigued and interested about you, and together we have to consciously and creatively make a collaborative we. Within kids, it's the same thing. So research has shown for decades that the predictor of our children's life success is when their parent has a coherent understanding of themselves and have or are taking steps to understanding and healing what happened in their childhood, or even in terms of epigenetics, what has happened in previous generations that is still in our cells today. And then the second aspect within that with you is that I have to be intrigued about you, whether it's my partner or my children. We might have been together a long time and I might feel that I have a PhD in you, but that's actually not true because we don't know ourselves completely. So there's no amount of time that we can spend with somebody else that means that we know them wholeheartedly and completely. I have to be interested in you. I have to want to be open to understanding you and your internal experiences and having boundaries around that this is my experience and that should be respected and loved. And this is your experience, and I can accept and love and respect that. And I don't have to always take it on. I don't have to defend or attack. I can just leave that in your reality. When we're talking about it in kids, it's a helpful reminder that we don't own our children, as hard as that might be. And we're here to learn about them. They are our manual. I can give you a manual, but your child is your manual in how to understand them and parent them. And each child will need something slightly different from us, just as they bring lessons to us about who we are and what we need to look at and what we need to heal. And then collaboratively and respectfully and with love all the time is where we consciously choose our we that we're creating with our partner and with our children. From very young ages, it needs, from birth, it's collaborative. And then at some point, somewhere along the way, we kind of change to it's parent imposed, which isn't really healthy. And that's just not me saying, it's research. And decades of research is showing that our connection far outweighs anything else with our children. So how are you defining your relationships? How do you define husband or wife? How do you define mother or father? How are you defining children? How do you define a male child? How do you define a female child? Do you even define them differently? Are you imposing and overlaying your definitions onto these people in your life? Or are you keeping that with yourself and openly discussing that with them? And then having the choice, I'm happy to show up in that role like that. But I'm not. And then how does that work? Because it's our definitions, it's our internal understanding of how we should show up in the world, how other people should show up in the world. And a lot of the time, that's where our pain and our hurt comes from. because we're imposing a belief system and a definition on somebody else who doesn't even know that that's the belief system that's being imposed on them. They mightn't agree with it. They might. We have to give them the choice. Yes, from children. And understanding them and teaching them the skills around how to be in relationship and how to ask for their needs to be met in a respectful way. How do we meet their needs in a respectful way? How are they choosing to show up in the world? Yes, when they're really little, they're not going to be able to communicate that with us, but they'll show it in their behaviour, which is communication. Their behaviour is communicating to us their underlying needs and emotions and feelings. So they are communicating with us, and we have to be intrigued and want to understand that. And then that's how we make this really happy, healthy, connected which will predict a greater success for our children long-term throughout their whole life, above IQ, above academics. If they have a secure relationship with primary caregivers in their lives, that's a greater predictability of their life success across the board, which I know is what I want for my kids. So yeah, that's kind of the first part, understanding those three components of our relationship, me, you, and then we, and how we are creating that. And each of those has a lot within it. That's very basic. How do we heal our own traumas? How do we heal intergenerational trauma? And trauma, there's lots of research now that doesn't have to be big things. Lots of research is looking into micro traumas, and they're tiny little things. Like we were at the shops when we were little and we picked being a woman, a girl, this didn't happen to me, but if I wanted to pick the blue bike and my mum or my dad, as I'm excited, I turned to look at them and they rolled their eyes or walked away and were dismissive. That can be a micro trauma in that moment. Doesn't have to be big rejections of self from our parents. It can be little things that as adults we might look back on that experience and be dismissive, but in the moment for that child, which is still within us, that pain and that trauma and that disconnect is still there. So there's a lot within understanding me. There is a lot to dive into. In understanding you, there is a whole lot to understand. Developmentally, particularly with children, a lot of the time now we're actually expecting things from children that they're neurologically and developmentally not actually capable for. We're reprimanding and shaming behaviour that is totally inappropriate for their development, but we're shaming and condemning them. But it's neurologically normal, developmentally healthy that they're doing things, particularly tantrums and meltdowns and overwhelms. We want them to be having it. It's part of how they grow and develop, not shutting them down. And then how we create our we, that's forever. We constantly reevaluate that and show up and make sure that we're showing up in the way that we want to for our loved ones, and making sure that we're teaching them those skills where they're lagging, not for us, but for them, and how we do that. So each of those, there's massive amounts of information within each of those things and massive amounts of work to be done, which is why keep following, and there'll be an ebook which explains more of that. Hi, so the next concept that I kind of wanted to talk about is from Dr. Dan Siegel in his Developing Mind book. He's also got Whole Brain Child, No Drama Discipline, Yes Brain. So phenomenal author and researcher into parenting and into neurological, no, that's wrong. Oh, it's gone. That, gone. Interpersonal neurobiology. Knew my brain would catch up. And it's the concept around our wheel of awareness, which I think is a really brilliant concept beyond and regardless of age or where we are. So the wheel of awareness, in the way I apply it within my practice and within parenting and with couples and with children, is to think about it like a wheel. Literally why it's called Wheel of Awareness. So in the center is your true self. your soul, your entity, your truth, who you really are beyond your belief systems and your thoughts and your feelings. Your true self is what's in the middle. The spokes going around the outside, coming out from your center, are things that you strongly identify with and things that you don't identify with, that can also show you who you are or show the world who you are. So you could have things like, for me, mother, daughter, business owner, author, yoga enthusiast, coffee enthusiast, vegetarian. So they're all things that I strongly identify with. But it could also be things that I don't identify with, like I'm not a smoker, I'm a pacifist. So in that sense, I'm not identifying with aggression and war and violence. Yeah, that in a nutshell, right? So there's lots of things. Sometimes absent friend is another one that I could probably put there. So it's not I am a friend to people. I'm kind of describing what kind of friend I am. Being a single mum, running my own business, having a child with needs, a lot of my time is directed and chosen to be directed there, not necessarily being directed nourishing my friendships, which is why I've labelled it as sometimes absent friend, because I mean, that's kind of describing me with my friendships in my life right now. So there are our spokes all around. Anxiety survivor, anxiety sufferer, chronic anxiety at times. So they can all be on there, and we just, where we are at that time is which one we'll be on. And around the outside, the rim of our wheel is where we place our awareness. So, and we have one for ourselves. Our children have one for them. Sometimes we even have one for other people. So we might have one for our child, and it's where we're placing our focus. So if they're having some behavior challenges and we're only putting our attention on their behaviorally challenged, that's all where we're putting all our energy and our focus and our time and our love and our withdrawal of love. If that's only where we're putting our focus, not on the many other things that make them up, we're missing seeing all of them. They're missing seeing all of them, because that's also where they're only going to be placing their attention. And we want them to know that they're more than that. Because what happens if that spoke breaks? Then who are they? Where then do they go? And while you might be going, oh, I really like that spoke to be broken if it is behaviourally challenged, I think we need to look at, for us, why is that so important? And maybe that they're behaviourally challenged is actually neurologically appropriate. So there's actually, it's not a behaviour challenge, it's challenging for us, but it's normal and developmentally perfectly okay for them. And maybe we would need to change the wording on that spoke so we have greater understanding of them and what's happening for them and how we can interrelate with them, with ourselves and with them. So if we say, if it's anxiety or depression, if we only put our focus there and that breaks, we need to know that we're still everything else. We need to have nourished everything else, which is really important when our kids get older and they have their first heartbreak. And if they've been putting all of their attention on that one spoke of partner, girlfriend, boyfriend, and that breaks up, we want them to know that their wheel still turns and that then that's not the end of them and life in general. Or when people retire, and if they've put all of their focus on a worker their whole life or whole working life, and that breaks, whether it's by choice or imposed, then who else are they? We also don't want them to know that that's it, that life's kind of over and doom and gloom, it's all sad, because it's not really the case at all. So we want to know that our rim, we can go around everywhere, but all of those things are also not our true self. They're making up what we believe and perceive is our true self, but our true self is underneath all of those things as well. So we're more than those things. So becoming aware of our own wheel of awareness and where we're placing our focus and our attention. Where our children's, what is their wheel of awareness? Where are we placing our focus of them on their wheel? Where do they place their focus on that wheel? And how can we help them rotate that around? How can we rotate that around for ourselves so that we don't get stuck? And same with our partners. Where are you placing your focus on theirs? Their own wheel or the wheel that we have for them? Where are we placing that focus? Do we rotate it around or not? Are we stuck in a place? And that would be either discussing it with them, coming and talking to a therapist, and discussing why we get stuck on a certain rim, or why we're stuck on a certain rim on our own in relation to our partner. If we're stuck on resentment for our partner, it's not great outcomes usually for relationships if that's where one partner is stuck, is on that resentment spoke. So looking at that, why are we stuck there? How can we move out of that is really important. But before we even dive into what we do with all of that, we really need to become aware of our circle, our wheel, our partner's wheel, our children's wheel, if we have our own wheel for them and we're not even seeing theirs, and where we place our focus and our attention on all of those wheels. So there's even a little bit of work just in that, let alone then exploring how we move forward from there. But again, there'll be an ebook available that will kind of dive into some of those things a little bit